Camera turned around. See my chicken hat. How you guys doing over here and over there? And over here and over there? Hey, welcome everybody. I just want to talk to you for a minute about the results of this most recent election experience with Roy Moore. I'm sure that you're all painfully aware of the implications of the seat being lost by a Republican. You know, I don't think most people in Alabama are really thinking about this because people get caught in the emotion of the news cycle, and they get caught up in the news itself. And what you've got here was the entire Democratic apparatus was able to focus on one election, and they were able to hammer home relentlessly. I mean, there were celebrities coming in from every seat possible to persuade the outcome on this particular election. But what's fascinating is it was so close. Most people are missing, like, to me what's really crazy is how close this election result was. We've got, I don't know, last I looked, 10,000. 10,000. I keep saying this is amazing. Donald Trump won because of something like 120,000 people that showed up in 5 swing states. 40,000 of them were Christians. If 10,000 Christians had voted in this election, instead of sitting at home with their arms folded in moral protest over the outrage of the choices, that could have saved the seat. Now, what happens when you lose a seat that's critical like this is the president has 160 judgeships that ultimately deal with issues that end up, metastasizing into whether or not men can be in a girl's bathroom and stuff like that. And so you need the judges at various levels that are going to be able to, reflect conservative views or at least moral standards, which the left is crazy. I mean, they don't have standards; they just have outrage. They're outraged with everybody, except most of the moral depravity, quite frankly, comes from their changing the boundaries of the definition of what is right and what is wrong constantly. So what we've got happening now is the judges are going to be more challenged because we got 4 goofball moderate, almost like establishment irritants, Flake and McCain and the others that are against Trump in the Senate. So you really don't need 5, nuts that are going to be voting against the president, and which now they've just given another seat away. The tax thing will go through because that's going to happen before Jones goes in. But Jones is about as close to a communist as you could ever get into public office. I mean, the left is going to tout all of his virtues. The fact is the guy's like totally nuts. So he's about as close to a communist as you can get. He's pro-abortion up until, I don't know, is there a point where he's against it? He's pro-immigration. And so the guy's going to certainly be what really is shocking, and it's going to send shockwaves through the Republican Party, as you and I are kind of new to this stuff, right? Since we became, realized that there was so much at stake in the last November. What's interesting to me is how the results of this election are going to be interpreted by different people. So let me give you an idea. This is the reddest state, the most Republican state in the South. When something like that shifts and goes into the column where you have an extreme leftist take it, even if it's by 10,000 votes. What happens is everybody is prone to come to wrong conclusions. So I'm just going to give you my take on this. And some of you are going to be talking about voter fraud. Well, they're going to be looking into that, I'm sure, where people being bussed in and voting like they did in New Hampshire and like Democrats have notoriously done. As one of my Democratic friends told me, he says his mantra in his district is, vote conscientiously and vote as many times as you can get away with it. So who knows? That there was election fraud. The fact is, Moore was a flawed candidate. And this is how God is going to have his way in a whirlwind. So let me give you some encouragement on this. Moore was a flawed candidate. He ran twice for governor and failed. That should have told you something. His handling of himself on the Hannity interview was less than spectacular. The best thing he could have done, it would have been risky, but the best thing he could have been done when these allegations came out, and this is what's a problem with all public service. I mean, think how many great people, how many Benjamin Franklins there are out there who could never get elected or serve, in a public capacity because somebody's going to talk about something they did when they were younger that was an impropriety. The best thing that that more could have done. This is just me now. I'm not a political consultant, but I have instincts on these things. He should have said, you know what? I don't know what this woman is talking about. The information doesn't even make sense. I didn't even sign Facebook, you know, greetings like that. The initials on this thing is my assistant. But I'll tell you this. If somebody wants to say that Roy Moore was a hellion 35 years ago or 40 years ago, I have to agree with him. Because I was a hellion. I was a bad boy. But that's the reason why I became a Christian, is because my life changed. My life changed in, September 28th, 1972. And ever since then, I have been, from my time serving the American military, from West Point till today, I've been a conscientious Christian, because God does change people's lives. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be in public service. So you want to go dig up some history about me 40 years ago? In this instance, I deny any knowledge of this. I think this is a political ploy. But don't get me wrong, I was no choir boy before I became a believer. Alabamans understand that logic. I mean, the CNN would have had, gone nutso with it. But then again, don't mean to be offensive now, but they're putting vagina hats on 100,000 women's heads anyway on the left. So they won't like any Christian confession, even if it's an honest one. But I don't know. We got to change the narrative in America and stop acting like we're electing saints to public office. I think Christians ought to be the first one to say, we understand. It's the whole point. Sinners have a tendency to sin. So why are we all acting shocked when we find out that unsaved men that don't have a real strong relationship with God or moral accountability or even a clear ethical standard in media and in Hollywood or in Washington are exposed for, not having standards? Let's talk about a Christian standard of ethics, and let's talk about the power to overcome and transparency and honesty about how people struggle. 40% of men are exposed to pornography in America. And, and the liberals would defend that right to have pornography pumped out 24 hours a day. Let's say, is that having an effect on the average age of a 13-year-old or 14-year-old access? You're darn right it is. Let's have an honest conversation about sex in America, folks, instead of this fictitious one. So anyway, that's just me talking. And I can only get elected in the most radically conservative Christian district of Texas, Conyers County. Maybe as, a county solicitor or something. But that won't go over in most of America. The good news is 82% of evangelicals did vote. Should have been 88%. 87% came out for Trump. Only 82% came out for Moore. If the Christians had showed up, they'd have judges approved that would be conservative. They would have immigration policy that would be reinforced. They would have abortion on demand shut down. They would have government spending reduced. But no, Christians had to get the Christians, and I'm going to tell you, it's Christians. And it's Christians not only that are white, but I'm going to tell you there's African Americans that are afraid. I stand with Christian, very endangered species. Black, conservative, Republican Christians. And there's, they tell me all the time how badly abused they are, how bullied they are, and how vilified they are. And yet, these are the guys that right now are working, strong to come out in very soon after the new year, with announcements about how President Trump is, even if the black vote isn't with him, he's still going to make good on his pledge to turn around the inner cities, because he wants to see the inner cities transform. And he's going to keep on working on this. So I'm saying Christians have to own what's happening in the culture. Don't get sucked into political allegiance. My allegiance is to what I believe God is doing. And listen, everybody else was voting for Cruz and for good Christians. I was voting for the one guy I was convinced wasn't a Christian, was Donald Trump, because I said God's anointed him. We got to start discerning who's anointed. Does that make sense? Anyway, Doug Jones is, like I said, is nearly a communist. But here's what the left's going to do with this. This is the good news. Here's the good news. The left is having a civil war, and the right is having a civil war within the parties. Let me explain to you how this works. That sounds so presumptuous. Let me explain to you. Well, you could explain it to me if you had the microphone. I listen to a lot of you all day. So here's what I'm hearing from people. On the right, McConnell and the establishment got the victory. Because, frankly, there's so little difference between the McConnell Republicans and the Democrats and the Schumer-type Democrats that they have this is what the establishment is. It's kind of like an inbred system of the elites and the entitlements. And now both sides can't wait to get rid of Donald Trump. Because he's an alien species. He only cares about America, not about any any backroom deals. And so he can't be bought off, so nobody trusts him. That's how Washington works. So anyway, it's like, He's not working for any mob families, so in politics. So they don't know, is he with the Corleones, or is he with this Lucchese? Who's he with? He's with the American people. So he scares them. He doesn't have any allegiance to anyone except his own pragmatism. So the big mistake here was Roy Moore was a flawed candidate. He was a flawed candidate because he didn't know how to come off credibly. And in a place that is as religious as Alabama, a lot of Christians had a problem with voting for this. Now, here's the mistake the left's going to make. They put forth a total lefty as a candidate because they have a war too. They don't want moderates. They want to push Bernie Sanders or, Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren or some new star who's going to come out. The ideal would be a fresh face with no history like Barack Obama, who represents minorities and hasn't said and done anything text-worthy to be quoted, so they could slip in there kind of like a blank slate, like Barack Obama did, and people will read into them all the virtues that they wish they could find in a public servant. Till they start voting, which I guarantee will be reliably leftist. So what's going to happen is Democrats are going to view this and the Virginia race as confirmation that this is a moratorium against Donald Trump. So they're going to put forward radical leftists, and they're going to have to do that in 435 House seat races and 33 Senate races in terms of primary contenders or people vying for who could be the most radical on the left. And the Democrats are going to vote for the most radical leftist they can get, and that person will be soundly defeated by a conservative. Now, the question is, we have to put the right conservative candidates out there. This is always going to be a problem. The challenge is not the election. The challenge is the primaries. As I'm getting an education, I know you're getting an education because I'm in this thing all the time, and I'm educating a lot of you. We do not put forward the right candidates in the primaries. And because we don't put forward the right candidates, we don't have really great choices. But, we're going to have to start to think this thing through. You want to check out a guy named David Lane of he's got a great newsletter that comes out every week. I mean, I read that and I'm ready to storm the barricades. But David Lane, I think it's a Statesman newsletter, but he's got a thing called Pulpits and Pews, if you look it up online. But he actually he talks to the people that are seeking God in the call of God in public service as pastors and ministers, and he educates them on how to get involved locally. And I think it's a great thing. Get involved locally in what's going on outside of the bubble of your own church, and get involved with your own county, your own city, and get involved and understand what's going on, and then communicate with your people what's happening. Because if the church doesn't get involved, we lose elections by 10,000, 5,000, 8,000 people voting. Like I said, 82% of evangelicals showed up. So the message to Washington is, don't start discounting you nut jobs up there at the Republican National Headquarters. Don't discount the power and significance of the evangelical people within the electoral process, because 82% came out. If 88% came out, you would have seen a different result. But that 5 or 6%, there it is among us, folding our arms, saying, well, I'm not going to vote for him. I don't believe there's good. You have to look at a choice between giving the devil a free pass or working with a flawed sinner, or somebody who was a sinner, who's now a saint, who doesn't have the sense to know how to cosmetically present themselves to the electorate. And that's really what you got here. You got Roy Moore's a good guy now. I don't know what the heck he was when he was younger. But this is 30-year-old allegations. This isn't like stuff that's coming out of the woodwork, from last week and last month. 30 years old. And by the way, the Democrats are half crazy, because this is the second thing that they got out of this is we want more lefties running against in red states against Republicans, which means they're going to lose. So let them continue to believe that. Let them get as radical left as possible, because they're going to lose. But the other mistake that I'm afraid they're going to go on is, you see, sexual allegations works. Now, they didn't do this in all the years that Bill Clinton was in the White House. They have all this pent-up moral outrage, but it's all going to be directed at Donald Trump, because they think strategically they can now become the moral outrage people. I mean, first of all, liberals are outraged all the time about everything. You never met a group of people that are more unhappy. If you go to a football game, they're not happy. If you go to a party, they're not happy. I mean, they didn't even want people happy at Thanksgiving. I'm reading articles in Esquire and in the GQ on how to make your parents miserable if they voted for Donald Trump. I mean, what kind of adolescence are we talking about? We're talking about spiritual adolescence in terms of like just knowing how to function in a civic culture. But the left is like that. They're when they're out of power, they're miserable. When they're in power, they assume that they're supposed to be. And when a Republican ever wins the White House, they're illegitimate. You guys forget this. Bush was illegitimate. Bush with the hanging chads, he was never accepted as legitimate. It's just that 9/11 was such a jolt of reality that we lost that narrative, and then it was like he became the warmonger guy. Fact of the matter is, when Democrats lose, you're always attacked as illegitimate for one reason or another. Now, here's the fascinating thing. What happened to Russia? What happened to Russia? I'm not hearing my Russia. What's going on with Russia? I want to find out. What's Vladimir doing? And how did he influence Trump? You know what? They're dropping that story. Watch. That's going to start going over here. It's going to go, well, we're still investigating. Oh, there's still Jared Kushner. Oh, they're still finding stuff. But they're going to keep on screwing up that news segment. And they're going to now go to the Donald Trump. They're going to go back to Access Hollywood. Isn't that going to be delightful for the next year? All the way up to 2018. You're going to hear female outrage about Donald Trump because they think they can get women to not vote for conservatives or Republicans because they got hats on their head and they're mad at Donald Trump. So what can I say? I'm telling you guys, I'm telling you the truth. You know that. So Alabama is a case study in what happens when you have the wrong candidate running. And listen, and if you screw up, you have to own it in such a way that it has credibility. You can't screw up and deny it like Roy Moore's done. And like I said, all he had to do was say, yeah, man, I was a hellion back then. But I don't know what this lady's talking about. I don't even know if I ever met her. Her facts are all screwed up anyway. She says, I met her at a restaurant wearing a suit every day. Nobody else working there ever recognized a guy coming in with a suit. And she's talking about a location I picked her up in, which is, 6 miles from where she worked. Why would I do that? This whole story, it smells of, being, another PP document from from Hillary Clinton. Can you believe that? Why are we not upset about that? That dossier that Fusion put together, that whole prostitutes urinating on a bed, that only that could come from this same school that wants to lecture us on morality, came up with prostitutes urinating on a bed with Donald Trump watching and applauding. How sick can you get? And then John McCain's hands are all over it. He puts it into Brother Comey, and Brother Comey takes it. He knows it's garbage. He submits it. Why? And then see this whole. Someone needs to go back to that and say, we didn't forget, and we're not dropping the subject like you guys are. We're going to hold your feet to the fire. If you want to get down into the sordidness of the American psyche, let's start with the pee-pee gate. I'm sorry to do this to you guys. You're good Christians, and I don't want to offend you, but this is what the left is doing. Don't you understand it? The dossier, the Fusion dossier that came up was based on a salacious lie that some idiot did, his mind sodded with beer in a pub in London, and sitting there going, hey, let me just say this, about that, and then they get it to McCain, we got all the money and time that's being used up on a Mueller investigation, who signed off on Uranium One. I'm not even going to go there. I'm not going to go there. On how we sold 20% of our uranium for $110 million cash donation to the Clinton Foundation, and Hillary and Bill got it done, and Mueller signed off on it. We're not forgetting that, people. I delete a lot of my broadcasts. You guys got to watch these live. 50% of my most recent broadcasts have been deleted. You know why? Because my staff or my wife watches them and says, Lance, you can't say that. Lance, delete that. I have nothing left. This is me, people. This is me. This is just me the way that I am. I can't help myself. All right. Anyways, don't worry about the Alabama vote. The one good thing is the liberals aren't going to torment us every day on Judge Roy Moore and Donald Trump. Judge Roy Moore and Donald Trump. You see, they were actually looking forward to Roy Moore getting in so that he could provide cover for Al Franken and for Conyers and for all the flare-ups and exposés that are about to come out. And they were just saying, oh, Lord, let him get in there so we could talk those crusty Republicans. Ooh, it's going to be a fusion of Moore and Trump and their lechery. They can't do that now. No, they're just going to come up with really outrageous left-wing candidates. They're going to keep on hammering on the sexual narrative of Donald Trump and his abuse of women, and it's going to backfire on them. Because Americans aren't stupid. Anyway, we'll be interested in keeping you posted on all these things. By the way, I want you to check out one gal's running. Is a great lady up in Virginia. Check her out. Cynthia Dunbar. Cynthia Dunbar, I wish I could give you her spelling of her name correctly, D-U-N-B-A-R, I assume. She's an attorney and a brilliant scholar and a woman with a track record on fighting to get accountability in the education system for the propaganda that the left has been pushing on college campuses. And she's running in Virginia. Just Google her, look her up, Cynthia Dunbar, Virginia. Check her out. She looks like she's the real deal. You know, one thing about women, Christian women running, they're less likely to have these salacious scandals. I mean, I just don't see guys coming out of the woodwork saying, well, she really, inappropriately touched my back or something like that. So it's going to be safer for women running. Women, we need you. We need you more than ever. We need you just because the left they'll go after, look at what they're doing with Sarah Huckabee. I mean, they don't care. The left will be so hypocritical. They'll tear apart a woman who works with Trump. But they got to be very, very careful if you're running for Congress or for Senate, because you are a lady. So let's get our Christian women out there, man. Come on. Let's let these women go forward and suit them up for battle. Well, that's what I'm saying. As usual, this is your Sherlock Holmes analysis of the election results. Don't feel bad about what happened in Alabama. Alabama is an outlier right now. Judge Roy Moore was a flawed candidate. Not an indication of anything, I say. Nothing is an indication of what's going to happen in the rest of the country. The left is going to misread it. I promise you, they're going to go after Trump mercilessly on sexual, backlash issues, and they're going to fail miserably. And they're going to put forward some goofball candidates because they're having a war of themselves. And we're still, and poor Bannon. Let me give a word to Steve Bannon. Steve Reno, don't you be discouraged. Don't you be discouraged, Steve. He wasn't crazy about Roy Moore after he found out about, the sex allegations. I mean, it was frustrating. He wants to make a point to Donald Trump that populism is the way to go. Be true to your roots. Don't get caught up in, negotiating with the establishment. We're going to take on that establishment this year before 2018. They're going to feel the heat, people. Yes, they are. Steve Reno, don't be discouraged. Do your meditation stuff. Stay in the vein you're in, kind of channeling your inner peace man. We're going to be praying for you. We pray for Steve tonight, Lord. Just cover his head in grace and peace and give him consolation and insight and understanding. We're going to pull together because he still is storming the barricades of the establishment status quo. The truth is, if the establishment hadn't beat so hard on Roy, I'm talking about the Republicans, hadn't beat on Roy Moore so hard, he might have ended up squeaking out that 1 or 2%. Who's to say how much damage Mitch McConnell did as he's swishing his little scotch right now? Ooh, we showed them. You screwed up, Mitch. Your days are numbered there, Mr. Mitch McConnell. You're going down. Because after all, we represent 25 million of us out there. We're not always organized. We're not always coherently motivated. But once we get our crosshairs fixed, bam, when we show up, watch out. By the way, hello to Right Wing Watch. There's a certain guy named Kyle something or other. You guys got to check him out. I'm going to be giving you spotlights on him. This guy constantly quotes me. If I said one incendiary, inappropriate thing, he will put that on the banner headlines. This is the ACLU funded. This is the Antichrist League of the United States, ACLU, and and this guy works for Soros funding, and they can't wait to call. And what's hilarious is I'm a Dallas businessman. I'm a media mogul in my own way. I'm somewhat of a social media celebrity in my own right. But he calls me Dallas Pastor. I'm a church goofball. Dallas Pastor, evangelical Lance Wallnau, says, then he'll say something stupid like, the Pope is the Antichrist, or some stupid quote like that, which I never said, by the way. He's a socialist, but he's not an Antichrist. Well, I'll stop there. All right. Talk to you guys later. Stay tuned for more. Be looking forward to seeing you. And I'll let you know if the Right Wing Watch ever quotes me on this. God bless you there. God bless you there. Be talking to you soon. Okay.